So let's talk really quickly about the footer. Right, the footer contains the closing content of a section or a page. Now, let's take a look really quickly before I start copying and pasting and cutting and stuff. If we look at this main section of the page right now, in each article, we have a header. So you might say, okay, well, what about having a footer in every article? That is completely acceptable. A lot of articles will have footers. And maybe that's where they'll have a byline instead of having a byline up here. Sometimes the byline will be, like instead of having just H2 here, maybe it would have an H3 underneath with a byline, or a paragraph or something like that with a byline to say who wrote the article. Or maybe it would come down here at the bottom of the article to see, so you could see who wrote it at the bottom. So let's look at how we can use a footer in a couple of different ways. We can look at the footer. I'm going to copy this. All right, I'm not going to cut it just yet. And I want to show you how you can use it as something that sort of closes the article. All right, and we're going to say end, excuse me, we're going to say not end, we're going to start the footer tag, and then we are going to end the footer tag. And then I could say right here, I could put something like a paragraph, and unless I wanted it to have a greater hierarchy, but I think I'm just going to leave it as a paragraph tag. And I will say inside of that paragraph tag, I will say by, and I'm just going to put my name, Lee Cotner, or John Doe, or whatever. I'll say Jane Doe. Okay, so that it's really clear that it's a byline. All right, now I could copy this and I could put that in every article, which is only one more article. I'll put this down at the end of that article, right? And I'll say that this one is by John Doe. Okay. All right, so that's one way that you can use a footer, right? Is that it contains closing content of some section or for the entire page. So I could leave that comment there. I could also put it down here again, but I'm not going to. I want to keep it a little bit cleaner. The other thing that we're going to do is after the main tag ends, we'll come down here and I'll put that comment down that reminds us of what a footer does. And I'm going to make a new footer like this, and we will, let's just close it up like that. And for this footer, because I have so many other footers on the page, which you don't have to have, by the way, you don't have to have these. The way that I told you that having a header is sort of like a strongly suggested best practice to have inside of the top of an article. It does not, you won't get warnings if you were to check your page validation against like some sort of validation tool. You're not going to get warnings if you don't put the footer at the bottom of an article, the way that you will if you don't put a header at the top of an article. But anyway, so I'm going to use a footer down here, and because it is a different footer than the ones that I've already used, I'm also going to give it an ID, and we'll say ID equals, and we'll say, you could say closing. Or page closer or something like that. Let's do that. Let's call it page dash close. Now, whenever you are giving the name of, like an ID or something, or like an ID or a class, you cannot have a space here. If you have a space here, then it means that you're trying to give it two IDs. All right, so we're going to do page dash close. And so that would be the name of this footer. And maybe down here, what we could do is put a paragraph or something that has maybe a copyright in it. So let's do that. Let's say copyright, and then we could put let's say Richard Nixon. I don't know. I'm just, first thing popped in my head. I don't know why. And you could put copyright Richard Nixon, all rights reserved or something like that. You could put the year here too. Now there's something else too. Let me show you as we are typing this what we're seeing. Okay, it's showing all this stuff right down here. You could also, if you wanted, you could have that not be a paragraph. You could also, if it was really important to you, you could have it like maybe as an H3 or something, and then it would show up as something that's more important in the document outline. It would actually show as a heading level. All right, So it's really up to you if you want that to be a paragraph or an H3 or whatever. Most of the time, it's going to be a paragraph. And the other thing too is that if you wanted to use a little copyright symbol, that is what is referred to as an HTML entity. Um, they're special characters, so you can't just like copy a copyright symbol and paste it into the code view. It has a special, it's literally a special character. So let me show you what it is. It's going to start with an ampersand, and it's the word copy, and then a semicolon. All right, and if we look down here and we scroll down to the bottom, you see that I get a copyright symbol. I do not expect you to memorize this right now, but just know that these kinds of things like, you know, registered trademark symbols, copyright symbols, M dashes, N dashes, things like that, they have what are called HTML entities, and you can go and look. There are pages if you just type in, let's actually do it, HTML entities, like that. You can look up right here where it says HTML entities. You can go here, like W3 Schools is a really good resource, and you can see some different HTML entities that you can use down here, and it shows you the entity names. Some of them are like this, where they're a little bit more intuitive. For instance, if this is a non-breaking space, NBSP stands for non-breaking space, and you'll notice the thing that's common between all of these is that they start with an ampersand and they end with a semicolon. Okay, and then it reads the special character based on the characters that are in between that ampersand and semicolon. All right, and so to actually put an ampersand on the page, it's ampersand and then AMP and then semicolon, right? And then as you see here, copyright, it's actually kind of easy to remember because it's ampersand and then the word copy and then semicolon. So if you can remember that everything is going to start with an ampersand and end with a semicolon, sometimes you can take a pretty good guess at what this is going to be. Like euro is euro, yen is yen, pound is pound, you know, for the currency symbol. Cent is cent, apostrophe is apos, you know, and so on. Okay, less than is LT, greater than is GT, right? Okay, so anyway, that's how the footer can work. It can either work as something at the bottom of the page, or it can be something that ends a major, you know, like a sort of a chunk of a content section, perhaps that's been repeated. It's typically how it's used. So I'm going to get rid of the footer comment up here. Now, section, a lot of times when I'll say something about a section, I don't necessarily mean section tag, but there is a tag that's called section. And I told you before that there was a tag that was generic that was called div, right? If I were to come here and I'm just going to take some space and I'll type div so you can see what I'm talking about. And div is one of those non-semantic generic tags that just sort of acts as like a wrapper that you can target with CSS. Well, people a lot of times would use way too many divs, and they would just give them IDs and classes and visually style them, but this is meaningless to somebody with a screen reader. You can see how all of this other stuff, like having, you know, a header with an H1 and nav and a list inside of it, that's actually meaningful. Whereas div, if all of this stuff said div, it would be really impossible for somebody with a screen reader to understand what it was doing. So what HTML5 authors did whenever they came up with these new sets of tags, like some of these didn't exist before HTML5, like header didn't exist, main didn't exist, article did not exist, footer didn't exist, right, aside didn't exist, section didn't exist. Well, section is sort of like as close to generic as you can get while it still has semantic meaning in terms of replacing this div, right? And so I'm going to just get rid of div for now. We're not going to use it at the moment because really it's only good whenever you're styling it with CSS. And what we could do is think about how we would want to break things up into different sections, right? And so that's another thing to think about. Now, we don't have a lot of content on this page, so it's a little bit, you might be a little bit confused as to why we would, you know, put something like section around, you know, around different sections of this page because there's not very much content. But you can use it as a sectioning tool. For instance, if we had a collection of articles that were related to Coachella, but then maybe there's another set of articles somewhere else that's related to something else, you might wrap section tags around those two different areas. Like for instance, we have main, oops, excuse me, we have main, but that's just saying that that's all the main content of the page, right? Well, what if we had some different areas that had different kinds of articles? Well, we could wrap section tags around those. And so if I were to come here and here, let's come down here like this. I could wrap all of this stuff, just so you know, I could wrap all of this article stuff right there inside of a section tab. So I'm going to go Command Shift A and I'm going to type section. And then you see that it put a section tag around those articles. Now visually it didn't change anything down here because we don't have any styling. But it might be meaningful, you know, if we did have a whole nother section with different types of articles. So hopefully that helps you understand. And we could also give this an ID if we wanted to. We could say ID equals, and we could say that this one is about, I don't know, musicians. All right, let's not capitalize that. Try not to ever capitalize your IDs. Okay, so we could say that this is the section about the musicians. So the page is called Music Coming to Coachella Valley. Well, maybe we're going to have a section that's about the musicians. Maybe we're going to have something else that's about musical styles, for instance. We could come down here and inside of the main section, or the main tag, I should say, right, we could have a new section and we can give it an ID that is called musical-styles. All right, and then that could be a new collection of articles that are specifically about musical styles. This is where we could, you know, put a comment in that says articles will go here about different musical styles or something like that. I don't know. I'm just kind of making this up. And then I want to wrap a comment around that. And if you remember, that was on a Mac, it's Command / to put a comment around something while it's highlighted. On Windows, it's going to be a different key than the Command key. All right, probably Control or Alt. But you can come down here and just take a look, and it'll be where it says line comment. Okay. All right, and so I could just put a placeholder there, right, for right now, so that you get the idea that it would have the same kind of markup as this other stuff does. Okay. All right, and so that addresses sections. All right, so let's go ahead now and come back to this business about the aside. So an aside contains tangentially related content, all right, and it's often styled as a sidebar. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to come back to it, because it can actually be a little bit confusing without the styling, you know, as to why it's called an aside and why it's different, you know. But it's not always styled, you know, to be off to the side of something, but quite often it is, and that is literally how the HTML5 working group came up with the name aside. So one of the things that you want to think about is, you know, how is it related to the content that it is sort of either part of or next to. And if you look you know, here, one of the things you're going to notice is that we've got this page that is about, you know, music coming to Coachella Valley, and then what we decided is we have this section that's about the artists, and then later we're going to have a section that's about musical style that we don't really have visible here yet. But maybe what we can do in this section that's about the musical artists is we can have an aside that later, if we wanted to style it, it could maybe show up literally off to the side, or, you know, on the left or the right or whatever. But in the meantime, what we could do is we could have it show up, you know, like right up at the top, right before David Byrne's name, before that first article, and we can make an aside that has their lineup, right? Maybe that would be a useful thing for people to know, and it is related to the artists. It is validly something that would be called an aside. So let's come down and find where we would put that. So here we are. I'm going to sort of pull this down a little further. Here we are in the main section, or the main tag, and then we have section ID equals musicians. And so I actually want the aside to be inside of musicians and not just floating out here outside of it. I want it to go before the first article, and later I could style it so that it moves off to the right side or something like that. But we're going to start with the tag, and it's literally called aside, and we'll put that closing angle bracket. And now what we'll do is go ahead and put the ending aside tag, and I'm going to go ahead and just knock it down there so I can just type in the center right here. So here's our aside, and I'm going to nest some information right in the center. And for the moment, I think so that I can see this a little bit better, so I can actually see what I'm doing off, in the display view, I'm going to change my view up so that it's like this again. All right. And then maybe I can see a little bit what I'm doing better. Okay. So here we've got this empty aside. I'm going to go ahead and paste some information so you don't have to watch me type all of it. And right now I've just got it, sitting in there pasted. Okay. And it just runs it all together because I don't have any, tags or anything like that around it. It's just all run together. And so I'm going to organize this in such a way that here where it says check out the full lineup, this might be actually a place where if I wanted to, I could actually have a header that is the beginning of the aside so that I understood that this was supposed to be inside of something that is like the introductory material. I don't have to do that, but I'm going to just to be consistent. So I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to do my Command Shift A, and I'm going to wrap a header around it. And then the other thing that I can do is I need to put a heading level around that. Okay, so I'll do Command Shift A again. And I think for this, I'm going to make it an H2. Right, all of my article titles before were H2s, and this is something a little bit separate, and so to me it has the same level of hierarchy, so I'll put an H2 around that. So I have a header inside of my aside, and then below that what I might do is I've got these two things that I intend to be links out to the actual website. So for this actually could be a nav that goes inside of the aside. So first things first, let's go ahead and wrap a nav tag around that. So Command Shift A, and then I'll wrap a nav tag. And then again, I'll highlight it again, Command Shift A, and then I'll do a UL tag. Again, actually each one of these is going to be separate. I'll select this one and I'll do Command Shift A, I'll do LI, and then I'll do the same thing for this one, Command Shift A, and I'll do LI on that one. You can see how handy that little tag wrapper thing is. And then around this where it says line up by schedule, I'll do Command Shift A, and I'm just going to type the A so that it knows to put an A tag there. And it wraps an A tag and it puts the href automatically, so I can go ahead, I'm just going to paste the link that I know goes there, and I'll get rid of these extra spaces that are there. And so I have an A tag there. Here, let's scoot that over so you can see this a little bit better. And then for lineup by artist, it's going to be the same thing where I select it, I'll do Command Shift A, and then I can type A, and it knows to put an href again. And here, let's get rid of that extra space. I don't know why it does that. And then I'll paste a link here. And that one is alphabetical by artist. Okay, and so now so far you can see over here it's updating it for me, and it says, hey, check out the fall lineup. Oh, full lineup, not fall lineup. And it's got lineup by schedule, lineup by artist, and now I need to format this stuff that's got the dates just so you could see the dates. And up here you'll see that I've got an H2, so I think it might be appropriate then for this dates to be wrapped in an H3. Okay, and then where it says weekend 1, I'm gonna wrap that maybe in an H. Let's try an H4 and see what that. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And then I'll wrap weekend 2 in an H4 as well, so for consistency. Okay, and then for these other things, right, where we've got The dates, I don't know that I actually want to have those as a list. I think I might just have those, I mean, I could have them as a list, I guess, but I'm not having them link out to anything or whatever. So what I'll do is I'll probably just put all of these in a paragraph tag. So I'll select all of them so that they're in one paragraph. I'll do Command Shift A and I'll put a P tag around them. And I'll do the same for this, and then I'll show you what my plan is. Okay, right here for each one of these, I can do what is it's called. I told you this in the lecture. It's empty element is the actual name of it, but I call them self-closing tags. So if I put a break tag, so that, see how they're all run together right now, even though over here they're all on separate lines, you know, I can have them not run together in the visual browser. So I need to put a little break tag, and the break tag looks like this. It's BR. It's really simple. Really, really simple. And then it just returns right down to the next line. So I'll copy that break tag and I'll put that there after the first two. I don't need it after the third one because it already has this paragraph tag around it and it ends. So I'll do the same thing over here after weekend 2, right? And you can see it starts formatting this so that this could actually be something, if you could imagine, for this aside, right? It's this whole aside right here, this whole thing. Oops, I went a little too far. Here we go. Right there. I didn't go far enough, actually. So there's that whole aside. That whole aside could actually be something that later when we style could sort of be like off to the right side while the articles show up here, right? And that would actually be really useful for somebody, and it is tangentially related to what you're looking at, okay? And so I think that that's something that's really useful to understand about what an aside is. And in fact, if we wanted to, here, let's scoot that over, we can take this aside comment, I'll cut that, and we can get rid of all this extra space up here at the top. And I'll come back down where the aside actually is, and I'm going to put it right here with the comment. And yeah, I'll leave that there. And I'll just let it stay long like that. Here, maybe I'll just get rid of that extra space so it's on one line. And then I'm probably going to get rid of that space before the nav tag too. All right, and so that's my aside. And if I wanted to change my view really quickly, you know, I could, but I want to see what it looks like here in the page. And so far, that's pretty good. That's the way I'd want it to look. I mean, it's got some really goofy cat lorem ipsum here, right? But that's not a big deal. All right, you get the idea. And so that'll really help you kind of start to think about how you can you know, organize your content, how you can nest things, how things really do have meaning. Just like if you were to write a paper, how they have meaning. It's the same thing whenever you're putting together a web page for someone to read. It's still something that people are going to be reading. It's not just visually browsing, right? They're actually reading it, they're trying to understand it. And so having all of the semantic markup is very helpful. And it'll make it a lot easier later to style it too, if it's all semantic like this. Okay? All right, that's the end of this demonstration.